Hello Velociraptors, and welcome to my classroom. Today we're going to be talking about biodiversity. Now you've already watched the TED Ed video, or should have watched the TED Ed video over biodiversity and the three main components that make it up: ecosystem, species, and genetic. All three of these minor or subset biodiversities are what make up the larger category of biodiversity. And you've noticed that this biodiversity is important because it's what makes an ecosystem or a species competitive and has better fit to survive. And we'll talk more about this as we move over to Darwin and a little bit about evolution in this course. Also, you might have noticed that as part of this exploration of biodiversity, we're going to make it a little bit of a game. So the more questions you get right, or the little Easter eggs you find like at 1 minute and 38 seconds, those will help you to establish your chances at winning a prize at the end of this. So make sure you try your hardest and think about some of the techniques as you move through it and pay attention for key clues and hints. Now, when we talk about these three main categories, ecosystem, species, and genetics, I kind of want to jump us into one of them specifically. And we're going to talk about species diversity. Now, species diversity, as you've probably heard before, a species is a taxonomic group. So when we talk about taxonomic groups, we have like kingdom, phylum, class, order, all that. Species is our smallest section that we can actually get to, the smallest category, the most refined category. And you've probably heard the definition that means that an organism can produce fertile offspring, meaning that two organisms from that species can produce fertile offspring. Now, I want you to notice that is a very kind of archaic definition of species, because as we moved into the future or moved to our present, we've noticed that isn't necessarily always true. A species isn't just meaning that they can produce fertile offspring. We see hybridization, and we're going to talk about a few of them. So if you do birds, you'll see some hybridization happening, occurring with species. You might also see it in some of the common examples of like how a donkey is made, or when other species are forced or interbreed, or even simple changes between they might be able to produce fertile offspring, but morphologically they might be completely different. So some of these we notice that species is a lot more complex than necessarily like this division. So in like everyday life, we could definitely maybe draw a line between what a book and a magazine is, but we can't necessarily draw that definitive line between species. It kind of gets a little blended. Now, so for this activity, you're going to be discussing what we call described species. Now, in order for an organism to be classified as described, it has to meet three criteria. First, you have to see it. Second, after you've seen it, normally a scientist writes up a formal description of that organism. And that's when they're going to create that scientific name composed of the genus and the species. And that formal description describes morphology, anything that might be of change, so that they know that it is a new species and not just another organism. So they've seen it. I need a formal description and name. And the third one a lot of people kind of forget about, and that's that we also need a specimen on file. So it creates this large system of where we keep specimens on file, and some of them you can see. I have a few visuals here so that you can see from the Texas A&M University. You can see that there's tons and tons of different organisms that we keep, from aquatic organisms to terrestrial organisms. These are those specimens on file. Now, of course, I haven't been to the Texas A&M University specimen collection. However, I've had the opportunity to actually see the Smithsonian's specimen collection, and it is huge. Like, I'm talking floors and warehouses full of specimens that are considered these prime examples. Now, remember, we're not going out and killing organisms to place them on file. These are organisms that have been collected, whether they've been found or reported, they're used. It's not like purposely going out to kill something so that we can provide it a specimen on file. But definitely there's so much such a wide array of specimen collection. So definitely at the end of this video, go ahead and look at the bottom, and I have a few little explorations where you can actually see a few of the specimen locations provided by the Smithsonian. So that's what we're talking about in terms of a described species. It has to meet those three qualifications. You've seen it, its scientific name and description, and it has a specimen on file. But how many described species do we have? What species have been more described? Which do we have a higher quantity of? Which species do we know more about? And that's what you're going to be looking at as you work through each of the activities as you move forward. So definitely pay attention, check it out, and explore what we know about these described species. Thanks for tuning in.